Hello and welcome back to the Direct Capital channel, and welcome to today's update about Bitcoin, Ethereum and Litecoin. So basically the market leaders in the cryptocurrency markets. We're also going to be talking about an interesting question that I got from one of my followers on Twitter, and it's about yesterday's chart when it comes to the retraces prior to Bitcoin's halving. We're going to dive into that. But before we do, I just wanted to briefly mention that I've added a brand new episode of Direct Capital Risk Management course. I've uploaded the impact of emotions on probability, and here I share a lot of my personal tips and tricks on how to better master emotions in your trading and just using probabilities to your advantage, because trade setups come in different forms and guises. Some are low probability and some are high probability, but because we're so emotional about trading a lot of the time, or at least most of the market trades emotionally, we tend to forget about these probabilities, and we can't even see that this is actually a low probability trade setup, that the profits from this trade are quite low on the probability scale, and we tend to get blinded by emotions, and a lot of the time people FOMO into these sort of setups that don't really guarantee, or at least don't promise, a good return on your investment. So it's very important to just be able to distinguish which setups are more highly probable and which aren't really probable, because after all, trading high probability scenarios is the key to success. It is the key to being consistently profitable in the market. So if you're interested in the Direct Capital Risk Management course, check out the link in the description down below. And of course, it's awesome to see that people are hyped about this course, hyped about this latest episode. So if you are interested in the Direct Capital Risk Management course, check it out. And without further ado, let's dive into today's update. So this is yesterday's Bitcoin chart, where we saw a rebound from the green area like we were talking about earlier in the week. But I did talk about this previous bear flag bottom switching from support into a new resistance, and this is essentially what I was looking for. After that 2.5% rally to the upside, I wanted to see if we'd get that double confirmation, because remember, something we spoke about yesterday in yesterday's episode, if we see a breakdown, the second stage to bearish confirmation is for a previous support to switch into a new resistance. And today, this is essentially what we got. We saw barely a candle close here, a spinning top candle close right over here, but ultimately Bitcoin couldn't perform that press up past this bear flag bottom. It couldn't do that, and this is now a resistance. So we saw a rejection back into the green box. So we are here once again, but of course we are seeing quite a bit of buy interest in the short term. This long downward wick just shows to us that it is tapping into lower levels, lower price levels where buy orders reside, and of course we saw a nice rebound. And just on the back of that, in the short term, we still might see some continuation on this bounce. And the reason I say that is that we see lower lows on price and higher lows on the oscillator, so on the RSI. So this sort of confluence gives us a strong bullish divergence. Essentially, lower lows on price and higher lows on the oscillator. This gives us a strong bullish divergence. And as long as this uptrend line maintains itself for the RSI, and this uptrend line, or at least this downtrending line denoting the lower lows for Bitcoin's price, if these two hold, then this strong bullish divergence will continue to be a good thing to look out for. But at the same time, we have to remember that basically speaking, Bitcoin is pretty much sandwiched in this region between the bear flag bottom resistance, which has been confirmed as a resistance, and the green area right over here. And earlier on in the week, we were talking about how we'd see bounces from this green region, how we'd probably see a rejection from this bear flag bottom, but at the same time, this green area essentially is still the focus point for Bitcoin's price. If this bullish divergence continues to hold, we'll probably see a rebound from here, potentially even to the top of this bear flag bottom once again, but we might even see a lower high from there. So that's also something to bear in mind when considering this bounce from the green area. But above all else, this green area is essentially something that I want to see hold, because if it doesn't hold, we'll probably see the range low become be revisited once again. So this is essentially the range low of the macro monthly range. And of course, if we zoom out, then we see that there is that bearish confirmation here just below the bottom of the bear flag. So we're not only seeing that confirmation on the 4-hourly chart, but we're also seeing it on higher time frames, specifically the daily time frame. So this is something worth watching for. We are seeing that this demand zone is offering some demand, but at the same time, this bottom bear flag support is pressing down. It's weighing down on price. So we are seeing this sort of compression in price at around this region. So essentially, we just need to look for those levels. Which level will give out first? So it is going to be an interesting weekend ahead. But having said that, that is Bitcoin's price predicament for the time being. Moving on, this is Ethereum. Yesterday, we spoke about this high low. This high low needed to hold just to maintain that bullish developing sentiment that comes with every high low. We saw a breakdown. For Ethereum, it did feel like Ethereum was going to roll over, and we are seeing that breakdown. But of course, this isn't confirmed just yet. We are seeing a strong wick, a long downward wick to the downside, but of course a candle close past here would confirm this breakdown, and essentially we'd have to look for these levels once again, something I alluded to in the previous videos. This is essentially the bottom of the macro channel that I just want to see hold. As long as Ethereum's above 160, then it still maintains that bullish directional bias when it comes to its meandering within the macro weekly channel that it's currently in, or at least it's currently in the bottom half of the macro weekly channel. But as long as it's here, as long as it maintains 160, then I think it's all well and good. But moving on, here's Ethereum BTC. We spoke about this being a demand area, and we're seeing that it's not really doing too well. We're seeing that the lower high is weighing down on price, and that we might be seeing a descending triangle, something I mentioned earlier on in the week. This is compressing price against the base. So the base of this descending triangle is essentially at around this region. So it does look like price wants to fill this volume gap. But of course, this is the next demand zone. So far, it's following through on what we were talking about earlier on in the week. So let's move on to Litecoin USD. Litecoin can't really decide what it really wants to do. First of all, we saw a breakdown. We spoke about this yesterday. We saw this breakdown over here. That was confirmed, but then we wanted to see if there'd be a bearish confirmation. So if this resistance would flip, or at least this previous support, would it flip into a new resistance? And it hasn't. And in fact, it's trying to flip this support back into a support. So this is why we're seeing this long downward wick right over here past this level, and essentially Litecoin will want to flip this back into support. So it really is all about this level, isn't it? Litecoin is trying to claim it as a support, but threatened to switch it into a resistance, so it can't really decide for the time being. Nothing's really going on with Litecoin's price action. I just want to see what it's going to do with this level, because if it claims this level as a support, then it could bounce from there. But at the same time, if it flips it into a resistance, then we'll probably see those price levels that I talked about in yesterday's video. So nothing much is going on at the moment. It is being a bit awkward here. This Litecoin price action isn't anything to be desired. But let's move on to Litecoin BTC, and the same thing happened roughly speaking, because we did speak about a bearish confirmation of this high low. So this high low did turn into a resistance. We saw some downside, and I expected some further downside from there, but what we're actually seeing in reality is that we saw Litecoin go up and to just test this high low resistance once again, and it's probably going to confirm a rejection once again before going to the downside. But before it actually does that, I'd like it to just resolve its situation and confirm that indeed we are going to see this rejection and see further downside. And very similarly to Litecoin USD, it doesn't really have a trend. It hasn't really established a trend, but there's really not much going on over here as we head into the weekend. Now, I'd like to dive into a chart that I explored yesterday. We spoke about the retraces prior to each of Bitcoin's halvings, and one of my followers asked me a question. Well, we do see a 2-degree angle right over here, and we see a 2-degree angle right over here. So, and basically speaking, if history repeats itself and produces a 2-degree angle trend line, then we'll probably see 16,000 around just before the halving, really, before that pre-halving retrace. So that would be the peak prior to the halving. But of course, we do see a 8-degree angle right over here. So one of my followers actually asked me a question, well, what if we actually see a 8-degree angle over here repeat itself? Because of course, we haven't seen price develop in this region. We haven't seen that 2-degree angle materialize, so it could be an 8-degree angle, who knows? So if it were to be an 8-degree angle, so I've just plotted that over here, that would lead price to be at 8,000 to 8,800. And the problem with this scenario is that it would violate a few key recurring historical tendencies in Bitcoin's price action. After all, we tend to see this pre-halving retrace, this blue retrace, up to 100 days prior to the halving. So this blue retrace is actually higher than this orange retrace, which is much deeper. And we see this prior to halving 1 and prior to halving 2. So essentially speaking, this blue retrace just shows to us that we're going to see 13.9k become breached next year prior to the halving. So in 2020, but prior to May 2020. So we'll probably see something like this. So in my opinion, this 8-degree angle is much less likely to occur because it would go against the grain of history, and this 2-degree angle actually would be in line with the historical tendencies that we see in Bitcoin's price. And perhaps most importantly, when I looked at all of these different price tendencies in my Bitcoin halving article, then of course, based on these recurring price tendencies, if we extrapolated them to prior to halving 3, then it did also lead us to the conclusion of 16,000 just before the halving. That would be the peak before the halving. So just seeing this prospective 2-degree angle become confluent with 16,000, well, that's quite interesting. That's interesting that we're seeing that number yet again. So this is why, because of that additional confluence, that I'm more confident in that becoming a reality should history repeat itself indeed. And that's just about it for today's market update, but before we wrap up, I'd like to talk to you briefly about unstoppable domains. Now, I don't often talk about projects on my channels, but this is one I really gravitate towards, because when I was starting out, I remember sending Bitcoin to a Bitcoin address like this was just black magic to me. When I looked at this address, a long string of letters and numbers that I had to send my Bitcoin there, it was quite a daunting task, and I had to really look at each letter, each number in particular. I had to double check that even the cap size was correct, that it was a capital G and not a small g. I had to check each and every letter and number one by one a few times before I actually sent that Bitcoin, before I had that inner confidence to send Bitcoin to that long string of letters and numbers. So I really understand that this is a pain point for new users, essentially, to send Bitcoin to a Bitcoin address, to send Ethereum to an Ethereum address, and to send Litecoin to a Litecoin address. And I totally understand why it can be so daunting to send your Bitcoin to an address like this, which is why I gravitate so much to blockchain domains from unstoppable domains, because if you can send your Bitcoin to a domain like correctcapital.crypto, like supermario.crypto, if you can link all of your crypto addresses, you link your Bitcoin address, you link your Ethereum address, you link your Litecoin address to one blockchain domain like Correct Capital Crypto or supermario.crypto, you can send Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum to that one domain and not have to worry about just looking, checking your Bitcoin address, Ethereum address, your Litecoin address to check for these numbers and letters. The other thing that I always had in the back of my mind when I was sending Bitcoin to a Bitcoin address like this, I always thought to myself, this won't bounce back. You know, when you send money somewhere, you always know that if you send it to the wrong details, it'll probably bounce back and you'll get that money and you'll be able to retry and send it to the right person. But with Bitcoin, if you get this address wrong, if you just get this one letter wrong, if you delete a letter by accident, your Bitcoin, which you send to that wrong address, it's going to be gone forever. And that always haunted me. I always had that in the back of my mind. So sending Bitcoin to a readable address, sending Bitcoin to a readable domain like correctcapital.crypto or supermario.crypto, it just makes it so much more easier. There's less stress involved sending crypto to a blockchain domain. there's less time involved in sending crypto to a blockchain domain because you don't have to double check or triple check your Bitcoin address. It just makes for a seamless, much more easier process. And today you can buy one domain and get one free. And this offer is actually ending on the 21st of October. So we have a few more days. Essentially, we have the weekend to pick up your domain and get one free. I've already picked up rectcapital.crypto, and I know a good offer when I see one, which is why I've picked up rectcapital.crypto already. Ultimately, it's all about improving crypto adoption, bringing Bitcoin one step closer to the mainstream. I'm all for improving crypto adoption, and I really think that blockchain domains make crypto transactions hassle-free and so much more easier and just more efficient in general. So if you are interested, definitely check out the link in the description down below. And that's just about it for today's market update. I wish you a pleasant, restful, peaceful weekend spent in the company of family and friends. I'm Rect Capital, and I'll speak to you soon.